Maya Miles summoned her security team and made my husband reject me. But moments later, the chandeliers in the St. Regis Grand glittered so fiercely it hurt Serena's eyes. Every surface of the ballroom seemed polished to a shine. The marble floor, the crystal vases, the silver cutlery laid out in military precision along endless white-clothed tables. A string quartet played something elegant and distant, as if meant for another world, one she had never really belonged to. Hit that subscribe button and tap the bell icon so you never miss our latest uploads. Serena stood half-hidden behind a marble column, fingers worrying the hem of her beige dress. She had stitched the dress herself late at night at the kitchen table while her husband slept in their king-sized bed upstairs. The fabric was modest and practical, bought on sale with coupons because Marcus had insisted the company's finances were tight and there was no room for frivolities like new clothes. Tonight, under the golden light and surrounded by designer gowns that shimmered like spilled champagne, her homemade dress looked painfully plain. Across the room, Marcus Thorne glided from cluster to cluster of guests like he owned not just the party, but the hotel and perhaps the city too. Tall, clean-shaven, tuxedo perfectly tailored, he shone with the easy confidence of a man used to being the center of attention. His laughter carried above the music, smooth and practiced. Serena watched him lean toward an older businessman, clap him on the shoulder, then turn to the man's jeweled wife with an impeccable compliment. The crowd around him warmed, animated by his charm. He looked up, searching for something. His gaze landed on Serena. The sparkle vanished from his eyes. His mouth tightened as though he had just noticed a stain on the carpet. He excused himself from his circle and strode toward her, a smile stretched wide for anyone watching, fingers closing around her elbow with a pressure that made her flinch. "Why are you standing here like a stray relative someone forgot to send home?" he murmured through clenched teeth, still smiling at a passing couple. "Get to the main table. Mother's speech is about to start. And for once, stop folding yourself in half. You're the wife of a chief executive, not some cellar mouse." Serena swallowed the sting of his words and nodded. After 10 years of marriage, the pattern was familiar. Criticism in public disguised as concern, contempt in private justified as telling the truth. She moved toward the long table at the front of the room where Patricia Thorne, the guest of honor, sat at the center like a crowned monarch. Patricia was wrapped in burgundy velvet that matched the roses in the towering arrangements at either side of her chair. Diamonds glittered at her throat and ears, sharp as ice. Serena took a flute of champagne from a passing tray to give her trembling hand something to do. She rehearsed the little phrase she'd planned in her head. Polite, respectful, nothing that could be twisted into an offense. She waited for a lull in conversation near Patricia, then stepped closer. "Mrs. Thorne," she began quietly, "happy birth." Patricia turned with a sweeping gesture of her arm, as if pivoting to greet someone far more important. Her heavy elbow slammed into Serena's forearm. The glass slipped from Serena's fingers. Crystal exploded against the floor with a crystalline crash that cut straight through the music. Champagne splattered across polished wood and onto the hem of Patricia's velvet skirt. The string quartet faltered to silence. Conversations died mid-sentence. Hundreds of eyes turned, latching first onto the spilled drink, then onto the modest woman in the beige dress standing over the shards. "Oh, for heaven's sake," Patricia said, loud enough that even the waiters at the back could hear. She flicked an imaginary drop of champagne from her gown with 2 fingers. "I should have expected nothing else." Marcus appeared at her side, as if summoned by the scent of humiliation. His face flushed an ugly red, not of embarrassment for his wife, but of rage at the fracture in his carefully crafted image. He didn't ask what had happened. He didn't check whether Serena was cut by the glass. He simply let his anger detonate. "What is wrong with you?" he barked, voice carrying through the sudden quiet. "Are your hands made of stone? Did you decide to ruin my mother's party on purpose?" "Marcus, it was an accident," Serena whispered, her throat tight. She bumped. "Don't you dare blame my mother," he snapped. "Look at you. You can't even hold a glass. I pulled you out of a rundown neighborhood, and this is how you repay me? You embarrass me in front of everyone. He seized her arm as though she were an unruly child caught stealing candy. Pain shot up to her shoulder. The room watched as he dragged her through the center of the ballroom, past silver-haired donors and local politicians, past women who hid their smirks behind manicured hands. Serena heard a soft ripple of approving chuckles, saw one man give Marcus a thumbs up as if disciplining a wife were commendable leadership. "Marcus, you're hurting me," she whispered, trying to keep up at her low heels. "Please, everyone is looking." "Let them look," he shouted, almost proud, tightening his grip. "Let them see what I've had to put up with. Your appearance disgraces my family. Get out of here." The doors to the terrace swung open as two men in black suits approached. The security team knew their master's moods all too well. Marcus jerked his chin toward Serena. "Get this out of my sight. Put her in the car and lock the doors. She can sit there until I decide whether it's worth keeping her." The guards did not question. They each took one of Serena's arms, not cruelly but firmly, guiding her through the cool night air toward the waiting black sedan at the curb. The ballroom doors closed behind her, muffling the return of the music and laughter. One of the men opened a rear door and half lifted her onto the leather seat. The door slammed, the central lock clicked, and she was alone. For a moment, the silence inside the car pressed against her ears. Then the humiliation hit her, hot and overwhelming. She pressed her forehead to the tinted glass, staring at the glowing windows above where Marcus would already be smoothing his jacket, smiling for the crowd, telling some charming story about his clumsy wife that would make people laugh. Her chest tightened, breath coming out ragged. She pounded on the door with both fists, first in anger, then in desperation. The sound was dull, swallowed by the car's soundproofing. "Let me out," she sobbed, even though she knew no one could hear. "I just want to go home." Tears blurred the lights outside into smears of gold. For a wild second, she thought of opening the door and running barefoot down the street, never stopping. But the door was locked, just like the life she had been living for a decade, contained, controlled, with no key of her own. A soft mechanical click sounded from a front. The engine shut off. The dashboard lights went dark. The driver's silhouette shifted. For the first time since being shoved into the car, Serena remembered she wasn't alone. Mr. James, the family driver, turned on the dome light and glanced at her in the rearview mirror. His weathered face had always been neutral, eyes lowered, shoulders slightly hunched in the quiet patience of someone used to being overlooked. Now his gaze was direct, and there was iron in it. "Mrs. Thorne," he said, his voice calm but unusually firm, "you must stop crying. It's time you heard the truth." Serena stared back at him, stunned into silence by the unfamiliar tone. The driver had been with Marcus's family longer than she had known them. He had ferried Patricia to charity luncheons, delivered Marcus to meetings, and drove Serena to the supermarket so she could buy groceries without a car of her own. He had always blended into the background like part of the upholstery. Hearing him speak with authority felt like watching a statue step off its pedestal. "Please open the door," she managed. "I'll just leave. I could take a taxi, a bus, anything. I can't stay here." "We're not going anywhere," Mr. James replied, turning in his seat to face her, "until you understand whose car this is and who has the right to decide where you go." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a tablet, the screen already awake. He tapped a document open and held the device over the seat. Serena took it with unsteady hands. "You know what your husband tells people about your father?" The driver said quietly. "That he's a useless drunk in the countryside. That he begged Marcus for money and then disappeared. Marcus enjoys that story." Serena flinched. She had heard Marcus mock her father more times than she could count. The narrative was always the same. Poor, incompetent Fletcher, forever in debt. A reminder of where Serena came from and how lucky she was to have been rescued. "What you don't know," Mr. James continued, "is that your father is not a failure. He is the one who built the company Marcus runs. 10 years ago, he handed control of it to your husband, under conditions." The document on the screen swam under Serena's tears until Mr. James leaned over and tapped a line highlighted in blue. Her gaze focused. The heading read, "Change of ownership, Thorne Group of Companies." Beneath it in formal text, was a single sentence that made her breath stop. Legal owner, Serena Beatrice Hawthorne. She read the line again. Her name did not vanish. Marcus's name appeared nowhere on the page. That isn't possible, she whispered. Marcus is the CEO. Everyone knows it. The papers, the website. He runs everything. He runs it, Mr. James agreed, but he never owned it. When your father brought him in, he made Marcus sign a contract. 10 years as a managing executive. The company remained under a blind trust in your name. If Marcus completed the term and proved himself decent, your father would hand him a share and retire. If he failed, everything stayed with you. This morning, your father triggered the final transfer. His patience has ended. The driver's words fell like stones in a still pond, sending ripples through Serena's understanding of her own life. She remembered the day she told her father she was engaged. He had been strangely quiet on the phone, then almost relieved. She'd chalked it up to worry. She'd never questioned why he refused to visit the city, why he insisted on keeping his life simple. She'd assumed it was shameful. Now, the assumption felt absurd. But why didn't he tell me? She asked, voice breaking. Why didn't he say anything when Marcus? She couldn't form words for the years of small humiliations and cutting comments. Mr. James's gaze softened, but his tone remained steady. He wanted to know who your husband really was when he thought he held all the cards. And he wanted you to see it too, without doubting your own judgment. He thought 10 years would reveal your husband's true character. Tonight, Marcus showed it to everyone. The driver reached back into his jacket and produced a folded sheet of paper, passing it to Serena. It was a photocopy of a legal document. At the top, she saw her own name and Marcus's. At the bottom, she recognized neither. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Proposed filing date, tomorrow morning. The assets section had a single line. Petitioner seeks no division of the marital estate due to lack of contribution. He planned to serve that to you at breakfast, Mr. James said. The moment his contract expired and he believed the company was his, he intended to discard you with nothing. He arranged for security to block your access to the home. You were meant to go from CEO's wife to unwanted guest in less than a day. Serena stared at the papers until the letters blurred. The 10 years of her marriage rearranged in her mind like a mosaic, shifting into a new image. The sudden proposal after a few months of courting, the insistence on a wedding date coinciding with a major business celebration, the way Marcus repeatedly called her useful rather than loved. It had all been structured, calculated. She had been part of a deal. Something in her chest, long softened by apologizing and second-guessing herself, hardened like cooling metal. The sobs that had shaken her moments ago dried up as if they belonged to someone else. "Open the door," she said. Mr. James studied her. Her voice had changed. It no longer trembled. It sounded like it had edges. He pressed a button. The locks released with a click. From the glove compartment, he withdrew a thick envelope and placed it on the seat beside her. "Your father asked me to give you this once you knew," he said. "Cash from a reserve fund he set aside for emergencies. I have a feeling you'll know what to do with it." Serena stepped out into the night air. The ballroom windows glowed above, and she could just make out Marcus's silhouette raising a glass and a toast. She smoothed the skirt of her handmade dress. It no longer looked shabby. It was simply what she had chosen to wear, and she was, quite suddenly, the wealthiest person in the building. The two security guards at the hotel entrance stiffened when they saw her. One moved to block the door. "Ms. Hawthorne," he corrected himself awkwardly, "we've been instructed not to let you back in." Mr. James joined her on the sidewalk, his hands folded politely behind his back. He met the guard's eyes and made a subtle gesture, a brief sign Serena had never seen before. The guard hesitated. The other glanced questioningly at Mr. James, then at Serena, then at the reflection of their own faces in the black car's polished surface. "Those instructions," Mr. James said quietly, "were given by a man who no longer has authority over this staff." The guard stepped aside. Serena walked back into the ballroom. She moved with measured steps, hearing the echo of her heels in the hush that followed her appearance. The musicians trailed off mid-phrase. Conversations fizzled. Heads turned one by one, like flowers tracking the movement of the sun, until the whole room was looking at her. Marcus turned too, annoyance flashing across his face, then confusion, then an anger laced with unease. He started toward her. "What are you doing here?" he hissed when he reached her. "I told you to wait in the car. Are you trying to create a scene?" Serena walked past him without answering. She climbed the small set of steps to the stage where the MC had been preparing to introduce the next performance. She took the microphone from its stand. "Good evening," she said. Her voice filled the room through the speakers, steadier than she felt. "I apologize for interrupting. I have a short announcement to make." A hush settled over the guests, the kind used to scandals more than sincerity. Marcus waved his arms at the security team, gesturing frantically toward the stage, but they remained at their posts by the walls, eyes fixed straight ahead. "My name is Serena Hawthorne," she continued. "For the past 10 years, most of you have known me, if at all, as the wife of Marcus Thorne. Tonight, I need to correct that impression. I am, in fact, the sole owner of the company that paid for this event, down to the last flower in those vases." A startled laugh rippled through the room. Someone shook their head, assuming it was a joke. Marcus barked out a forced chuckle. "She's not well," he called out. "Too much stress. Please forgive her. Serena, get off the stage." She ignored him and opened the envelope Mr. James had given her. The sound of paper sliding against paper crackled softly in the microphone. An internal review has revealed that company funds have been used to cover personal expenses, including this extravagant party. As owner, I am terminating this event immediately. The staff will be paid what they are owed. The rest of you will need to find your own way to celebrate. The head waiter, who had been hovering near the kitchen doors with a tight jaw all evening, stepped closer. Serena beckoned him to the stage and pressed a thick stack of cash into his hands. Murmurs swelled as he counted the bills, then nodded with something like relief in his tired eyes. "This covers the outstanding wages and more," Serena said into the microphone. "Please distribute it among your team. Your work is not the problem tonight." Marcus's anger finally boiled past control. He stormed toward the stage, shoving aside a chair that scraped loudly against the floor. "Enough," he roared. "You've embarrassed me for the last time. Security, remove her right now, or you're all fired." 2 guards moved then, but not toward Serena. They stepped in front of Marcus at the foot of the stage, broad shoulders blocking his path. "I'm sorry, sir," one said. "We can't do that. The owner has spoken." The word owner hung in the air like a bell toll. Eyes swung from Marcus to Serena and back again. Patricia half rose from her seat, her face pale beneath her heavy makeup. "This is outrageous," she shouted. "Marcus, do something." He tried. He sputtered. He threatened. He attempted to charm, but the party had shifted its center of gravity. The staff's loyalty had always been to their paychecks, and those now flowed from a different hand. Guests who had approached Patricia with flattery earlier now edged toward the exit, worried their presence might be noted on the wrong side of a scandal. Serena's hand shook only once, when she laid the microphone gently on the stand and stepped away. The worst was not over. The signing of papers, the confrontation at home, the excavation of 10 years of lies, that all lay ahead. But a line had been crossed. There were things she could no longer unknow, that the company was hers, that her father had never abandoned her, and that the man she had shared a bed with was prepared to kick her into the street as soon as he thought he no longer needed her. She descended the steps to the stage. Marcus stared at her as if seeing a stranger. For the first time in 10 years, she did not lower her eyes. "The car key," she said calmly to Mr. James as she passed him. "I think I'll drive tonight." He smiled, just a little, and placed the key in her open palm. The next morning, a sharp October wind swept along the glass facade of the Thorne Group headquarters, carrying a swirl of dry leaves into the revolving doors just as Marcus shouldered his way inside. He hadn't slept. The mirror at the motel had shown him a stranger, collar crooked, eyes bloodshot, the surface polish stripped away. He didn't care. All that mattered was getting to his office, seizing the original documents from the safe, and forcing Serena to undo whatever madness had been unleashed. He strode toward the turnstile and swiped his access card with a familiar flick of his wrist. The reader flashed red. The gate stayed locked. Lena, he barked at the young receptionist behind the desk. The system's glitching. Open the gate manually. She looked like she wanted to disappear behind her computer. Good morning, Mr. Th. Marcus, she stammered. Your badge has been deactivated. Deactivated by whom? He snapped. I'm a chief executive officer. Restore it immediately. She swallowed hard and lifted a shaking hand to the bulletin board mounted on the wall. Marcus followed the gesture. A new notice, printed on official letterhead, was pinned in the center. Effective immediately. Removal of CEO Marcus Thorne due to expiration of contract term and loss of confidence. Appointment of acting executive, Serena B. Hawthorne. Her signature curled at the bottom, large and sure. Marcus tore the paper down, crushed it in his hand, and flung it to the floor. This is a forgery, he shouted, aware of people stopping behind him to watch. This is illegal. I'll call the police. I'll have all of you fired. The security guard at the lobby entrance shifted his weight, one hand resting near his baton. Lena flinched at the volume of Marcus's voice. I'm truly sorry, she whispered. We're just following the directive. Marcus stormed out, nearly colliding with the revolving door. He saw red. In his mind, Serena was still the timid woman in a cheap dress, the one who flinched if he raised his voice and apologized even when she hadn't done anything wrong. The thought that she had enough spine to sign him out of his own company did not fit into the picture he had painted of her. There was still the house, he told himself as he drove, knuckles white on the steering wheel of his sleek SUV. The original agreement with her father, the investment contracts, were locked in the safe in the study. He would march in, demand the combination, and if she refused, he would force it out of her with threats. Paper trumped posturing. The world had always worked that way for him. When he reached the iron gate of their estate, he punched in the access code with impatient fingers. The keypad beeped in protest. The lock stayed closed. He tried again. Nothing. He jabbed the intercom. Serena, open this gate right now. No answer. He kicked the metal in a childish burst of fury. Marcus. The voice came from the neighboring yard. The retired colonel who lived next door stood by his hedge in a wool sweater, hose still running over his neat lawn. He frowned at the sight of Marcus throttling the gate. She changed the code. Marcus spat. In my own house. She's lost her mind. The colonel turned off the water and walked closer, leaning on the fence. It's not your name on the deed, he said quietly. She came by early this morning with a lawyer. She asked me to keep an eye out and call the police if you try to break in. Marcus stared at him, momentarily speechless. Then rage surged through him again. He grabbed a rock from the gravel path and hurled it at the front window. The glass trembled but held. I'll call the police, the colonel said, voice hardening. You're vandalizing property that isn't yours. Go home, son, before you make this worse. Inside, behind double-glazed glass, Serena stood at an upstairs window watching her husband's fury. Her hands were cold around the folder she held. The urge to run downstairs, fling open the door, and beg him to calm down pulsed like muscle memory. 10 years of smoothing over his temper did not vanish overnight. Maybe I should talk to him, she said, not turning away from the sight of him kicking the gate. He's still my husband. No, Mr. James said behind her. His voice was gentle, but there was no hesitation in it. He is the man who would have thrown you out today. There's something you need to see first. He set a cardboard box on the windowsill next to her. Inside were folders, each labeled in neat handwriting. Serena opened the top one. A stack of photographs slid into her hand. Grainy prints of her childhood home taken from a distance. An image of her father bent over his vegetable garden. Another of a teenage Serena walking down the road from the music school in her small town. Dates were scribbled on the backs, all from months before she had met Marcus. He was watching us, she whispered. Studying you, Mr. James corrected. Your father didn't just hand over his life's work to a charming stranger. He wanted to see what kind of predator was circling his daughter. Marcus proved to be exactly what he suspected. Beneath the photographs lay a thick contract, heavy paper edged in gold, crisp despite its age. Serena read the first paragraphs, brow furrowing. Her father had agreed to place a large sum of capital under Marcus's management, with one key condition. Marcus would marry Fletcher's daughter and remain in a continuous legal marriage for 10 years. Only after that would the company's ownership be transferred fully to Marcus. If he initiated a divorce before the term, he forfeited everything and owed penalties instead. The date of their wedding was typed in black ink halfway down the page. The anniversary they had celebrated in expensive restaurants each year was tonight's date, 10 years ago, and the divorce petition in her hand was stamped for filing the next morning. He waited, Serena said. Her voice was steady, but a hollow numbness spread through her chest. He counted the days. Yes, Mr. James said quietly. Every bouquet, every compliment, every apology was part of the countdown. When the clock struck 10 years, he planned to cut you loose. Serena leafed through another folder. It held printed emails between Marcus and his lawyer from the previous week. In one, Marcus wrote, "As soon as midnight hits, prepare the papers. I want her gone by breakfast. Make sure she doesn't get a cent. 10 years with that gray moth is more than enough." From outside came the faint sound of a police siren drawing closer. The colonel had kept his word. Serena closed the folder. Something inside her, whatever fragile belief had remained that there had once been real love in Marcus's gaze, finally snapped. The grief she had carried for years curdled into something colder and cleaner. "Don't call the police," she said suddenly. Mr. James blinked. "They're already on their way." "Then tell them we won't press charges for vandalism," Serena replied. "Let them warn him and leave. I don't want him locked up for kicking a gate. That would be mercy." The driver frowned. "You think that's mercy?" "Prison is walls and a schedule and rules," Serena said, her eyes still fixed on Marcus being restrained by an officer at the gate. He would tell himself he was a victim. "I want him free. I want him to watch as everything he thought he owned slips through his fingers while he can't do anything about it." She picked up the next folder from box. The label read, "Patricia Thorne, Condominium." Before she could open it, the front door downstairs rattled violently. A key scraped against the lock. Serena's stomach dropped. She had forgotten Patricia's spare key, the one Marcus had insisted on giving his mother for emergencies. The lock turned. The door flew open. "You little parasite!" Patricia's furious voice echoed up the stairs. "Where are you? Show your face." Heavy footsteps pounded up. The living room door crashed inward. Patricia stood there, still in last night's burgundy dress, now wrinkled and stained. Her hair had come half loose, lipstick smeared, but her outrage burned as hot as ever. "You ruined my son," she shrieked, charging toward Serena with her hand raised. "You humiliated us in front of everyone. Serena's hand shot up, faster than she knew she could move. She caught Patricia's wrist in mid-swing. The older woman gasped at the strength of her grip. "Don't," Serena said, voice low and controlled. "You will never raise your hand to me again." She pushed the arm away. Patricia staggered, clutching the back of a chair for balance, eyes wide with disbelief that the mouth she had mocked for a decade had dared to stop her. "You've gone insane," Patricia hissed. "This will all be undone. Marcus will fix it. You'll end up on the street where you belong." Serena walked calmly to the table, picked up the folder marked with Patricia's name, and opened it. She laid a bank-stamped mortgage agreement on the coffee table. "This," she said, tapping the top of the page, "is the loan your son took out against your luxury condo. High interest, risky terms. He signed it to cover the gaps his embezzlement had opened before the last audit. He was counting on taking control of my company at the 10-year mark to pay it off." Patricia snatched the paper and scanned it, confusion giving way to horror. "He told me it was some formality," she whispered. "He said it didn't mean anything. He swore my home was safe." "The grace period ended last week," Serena said without softening. "He failed to make the payment. The bank has the right to seize the property." She produced a second document, an eviction notice with her own signature at the bottom. "As it happens, the holding company that owns a controlling share of that bank belongs to my father, which means I decide what happens to the collateral. Legally, your condo is company housing now. You are not an employee. You have 24 hours to vacate." Patricia's knees buckled. She dropped into the chair, the notice trembling in her hands. "You wouldn't dare," she whispered. "I'm an old woman. I'm his mother. Where would I go? For 10 years, Serena said quietly, you told me your son's roof over my head was an act of mercy, and that I should be grateful every time I walked past your front door. Consider this an opportunity to learn what it feels like to depend on someone else's generosity. Patricia's eyes filled with tears, but behind them, fury still boiled. This is all your fault, she burst out suddenly. If you had died sooner, none of this would have happened. Marcus would have gotten everything without these games. The words hit Serena like a slap. You want me dead? You think your father cares about you? Patricia sneered, lips curling. He wrote to you every month at first. Pathetic letters. My dear girl, how are you? I miss you. I pulled them from the mailbox before you woke up. And then I wrote back. Serena's heart thudded painfully. You what? I forged your handwriting, Patricia said with vicious satisfaction. It wasn't hard. Don't write to me. I'm ashamed of your poverty. Send money or forget I exist. Those are my words. His face in the photographs. She laughed, harsh and ugly. I kept the letters as a souvenir. They're in a shoebox on the top shelf of my closet. Every month I read them and celebrate how cleverly I cut you off from him. The room spun. For 10 years, Serena had gone to sleep believing her father had chosen silence over her. Every unanswered call, every empty mailbox visit had carved a hollow in her. The knowledge that Patricia had been standing between them, grinning as she poisoned their bond, made her feel sick. You are not just cruel, Serena whispered. You are monstrous. Mr. James stepped forward, fists clenched at his sides. Say the word, he growled. I'll carry her out right now. No need to wait 24 hours. Serena stared at her mother-in-law, now a shaking figure hunched in the velvet dress that had seemed so imposing the night before. The urge to scream, to throw the papers in her face, surged up and then receded, leaving a cold clarity. No, Serena said. Let her pack her bags herself. Let her fold every dress, knowing she has nowhere to go that I do not permit. That will be enough punishment. She leaned closer, her voice low. But listen carefully. If that shoebox of letters is not produced when I inspect the condo tomorrow, I will not simply evict you. I will report you for mail theft and forgery. You're terrified of poverty. You might find prison worse. Patricia blanched. For a moment, her hatred flickered, overshadowed by naked fear. She clutched her handbag with trembling hands and stumbled toward the door without another word. The front door slammed moments later. Serena sank onto the sofa and pressed her palms into her eyes. Mr. James sat beside her, careful not to touch her unless invited. He did write to me, she whispered. All that time. He never stopped, Mr. James said. He told me once that he suspected the letters weren't reaching you, but he kept sending them anyway. He said, one day, she will see them all at once, and she will know I never left. Serena drew in a long breath, the first that didn't hurt. There would be time later to drive to the bank, to talk to her father, to gather the letters like lost pieces of herself. For now, something else demanded attention. Let's go, she said abruptly, standing. Where? The driver asked. To the office, she replied. I want to see exactly how much he stole while he was calling me a burden. The company's accounting department was a world of neutral walls and humming computers, far removed from chandeliers and charity galas. Serena sat at the computer Marcus used to command from, fingers moving over the keyboard with more certainty than she felt. Mr. James stood by the door, keeping anyone from disturbing them. The financial records blossomed on the screen, columns of numbers, vendor names, payment descriptions. At first, the entries blurred together. Then patterns emerged. Hotels and restaurants labeled as client entertainment that matched weekends Marcus claimed were business trips. Jewelry stores that coincided with periods when he complained money was tight. It was all infuriating, but predictable. Then she saw a recurring charge from a private clinic she knew all too well, Beaumont Center for Reproductive Health. Her own treatment had taken place there, sessions she had begged for and treatments she had believed they couldn't afford. A payment line showed up every month for 5 years, $8,500, but consulting services. Serena printed the records, her hand shaking only once. We're going to the clinic, she said. The waiting room at Beaumont smelled of antiseptic and lavender. Photos of smiling babies line the wall, each with a printed note. Thank you, Beaumont Center. Dr. Morove, the fertility specialist who had guided Serena through years of tests and hormonal treatments, looked up as she burst into his office without an appointment. Serena, he said, pushing back from his desk, startled. We can schedule. She slapped the printout of transfers down between them. Explain this, she said. 5 years of monthly payments from the company to your private account. A sheen of sweat appeared on the doctor's forehead. He removed his glasses and began polishing them with a cloth that trembled slightly. That information is confidential, he began. Financial arrangements between... I'm the owner of the company that paid you, Serena cut in, voice sharp. And more importantly, I am your patient. You will tell me exactly what you were paid to do, or you will explain it to an investigator with a recorder on the table. He sagged into his chair. His next words came out in a rush, as though he wanted to be rid of them. Your test results were normal from the beginning, he admitted. There was no medical reason you couldn't conceive. Marcus Th. Your husband insisted I tell you otherwise. He wanted you to believe you needed treatment, so you wouldn't suspect anything. The pills you were taking were contraceptives, high-dose hormones. They prevented pregnancy rather than encouraging it. For a moment, the room narrowed to a pinpoint. Serena heard a rushing sound in her ears, like waves collapsing on a shore. Memories flashed up, her sobbing in the car after yet another negative test. Marcus holding her just long enough to whisper, maybe it just isn't written for us, before checking his phone. The quiet shame she carried like a hidden weight convinced her body had failed them both. You let me think it was my fault, she said, each word carved from ice. You stood there and watched me cry, watched me beg for another round of treatment, and you took money to keep me barren on purpose. He said a child would complicate the divorce, the doctor murmured, staring at his hands. He said he needed a few more years of freedom. He offered $50,000 a month to maintain the treatment plan. I told myself it was a temporary compromise. That is no real harm. I was wrong. You didn't just compromise, Serena said, standing. You broke everything you were sworn to uphold. Save your explanations for the ethics board. She walked out into the cold air without waiting for a reply. Mr. James fell in a step beside her, face dark. I heard enough, he said. You want to call the police from here? Not yet, Serena answered. There's something I want more than his prison sentence. I want his life to collapse while he's still standing in it. She pulled out her phone and dialed the bank. This is Serena Hawthorne, she said when the operator answered. Owner of Thorne Group. Effective immediately, freeze all corporate cards issued to Marcus Thorne. Suspend his expense accounts and revoke his access to company vehicles. Hours later, at a gas station on the edge of town, Marcus stood beside his SUV, nozzle in the tank, watching the digits climb on the pump. He took out his platinum corporate card, the one he always bragged about at lunches, and slid it into the machine. The display flashed. Transaction declined. See attendant. He scowled, tried his gold card. Declined. His personal card. Declined. Hey, buddy. The clerk's voice crackled over the speaker. You gonna pay? There's a line. Marcus rummaged in his wallet. Crumpled bills, not nearly enough. Irritation turned to unease. Then the car's dashboard went dark. The engine died, as if someone had pulled an invisible plug. A message appeared. Remote lockout activated. Contact leasing company. He slammed his fist on the steering wheel and called the leasing office, shouting his name, his position. I'm afraid we can't help you, Mr. Thorne, the representative said politely. The company owner terminated the lease this afternoon. The vehicle is scheduled for repossession. Our tow truck is already en route. Marcus watched the tow truck turn into the station a few minutes later. The driver held out a clipboard. Keys, he said. Paperwork's in order. Marcus cursed, grabbed his briefcase, and stalked away down the road, ignoring the stares of other customers. Dust stung his eyes. His mind raced to his last symbol of power, the expensive watch on his wrist, a gift from friends who had toasted him as if he were one of them. He found a sleek pawn shop downtown and thrust the watch at the appraiser. I need to move this quickly, he said. It's worth at least 6 figures. Give me $1 million now. We'll argue about the rest later. The older man turned the watch over, peered at it through a jeweler's loupe, and sighed. "You've been cheated, son," he said. "This is a replica. Gold-plated case, cheap mechanism. I wouldn't give you more than $50, and that's being generous." The sting of humiliation was almost physical. For years, Marcus had paraded that watch as proof of his importance, flashing it at every opportunity. Now he realized the joke had always been on him. The people he considered allies had given him a fake and watched him flaunt it like a fool. He stormed back onto the street, stunned by how quickly the city seemed to have turned its back on him. Calls to business partners went unanswered or were curtly cut off. "Nothing personal," one man said before hanging up. "Your wife is the one we'll be dealing with now. She has the actual signature." By evening, Marcus had nowhere left to go but a place he had always despised, the old family cabin in the woods beyond the city. His grandmother had adored it, with its creaking floors and forest smells. He'd kept it only because Patricia had begged him to preserve something of our lineage. Now he thought only of the silver-framed icons in the corner of the living room, which his mother claimed were worth a fortune. He drove out with borrowed money in a stranger's car, then kicked in the flimsy door without bothering to look for the key. Inside, dust motes swirled in the beam of his phone's flashlight. He went straight to the icon corner and dragged a chair beneath the shelf. "Sorry, Saints," he muttered as he lifted the first icon from its hook. Business is business. He turned it over, expecting some sign of age or artistry. Instead, in black marker, were the words, "Reproduction, 2018, Sofino Art Workshop." He grabbed the second, the same marking, the third, identical. "What is this?" he shouted, hurling the last icon onto the floor. The wooden backing cracked. A cheap print slid out. "Looking for something that doesn't belong to you?" The voice from the doorway made him whirl around. Mr. James stood there, hands in his pockets, coat collar turned up against the chill. "You," Marcus spat. "You stole them. You swapped the real ones." "Where are they?" "I secured them," the driver replied evenly. 5 years ago, when you first mortgaged your mother's home, I realized there was nothing you wouldn't sell. I replaced the icons with copies. The originals are in a safe deposit box under Serena's name." Marcus's hands curled into fists. "You were always against me," he hissed. "Always watching. Spying. I was protecting the people you thought were expendable," Mr. James said. He took out his phone and tapped the screen. A recording played, Marcus's own voice, slightly distorted by the acoustics of a car interior. "Yeah, Chloe, just wait a bit longer," the recorded Marcus said. "When I take full control, I'll clean the house. I'll have Serena committed and that old driver locked up for stealing parts. People like him are tools. Use them, toss them. That's how the world works." The recording clicked off. The quiet that followed was heavy. "You planned to frame me," Mr. James said softly. "To send me to prison so I wouldn't be around to tell the truth. And now here you are, in a house that isn't yours, having broken a door and tried to steal what you thought were cultural treasures. That's a serious crime, Marcus." Sirens wailed faintly in the distance. You call the police?" Marcus stammered. "Of course," Mr. James said. "They'll be here any minute. They're very interested in the list of things you've forged and stolen." For a moment, panic clawed at Marcus's throat. Then indignation, his old shield, flared. "You think I'll go down alone?" he snarled. "I know people, judges, a district attorney whose son I kept out of jail. I'll be out before you've finished giving your statement. And then, Mr. James asked quietly. Marcus faltered. The future that stretched before him was a fog of closed doors and cold faces. But one flickering idea remained: public opinion. If he could turn the narrative, make Serena the villain, perhaps he could claw something back. He used his single allowed phone call at the precinct not to summon a lawyer, but to dial an old favor owed. The district attorney did, in fact, arrange his release on a technicality. Marcus stepped back into the night, more furious than ever, and headed for his last ally, his mother. At Patricia's condo, boxes already stacked in the hall told him everything. She had been packing. He told her about the press conference he'd hastily arranged at the City News Center, about the script he had written in which Serena was portrayed as a manipulative tyrant who had forced them to sign things under threat. He pressed the pages into her hands, fingers digging into her shoulders when she hesitated. "Either you read this," he said, eyes wild, "or you sleep in a shelter tomorrow. Choose." She chose. An hour later, camera lights glared hotly in the news center's press room. Journalists leaned forward, hungry for every scrap of scandal. Marcus looked suitably disheveled in an old sweater, projecting the image of a man crushed by injustice. He began with a tremulous apology for airing personal grief, then nudged the microphone toward Patricia with performative tenderness. "Mother," he said softly, "tell them." Patricia looked at him, at the crumpled pages in her hand, at the rows of cameras. Somewhere beyond those lenses, Serena was watching. Marcus's fingers tightened just enough on her wrist to hurt. "Tell them," he hissed under his breath, "or you're done." Patricia's eyes cleared. She saw, suddenly, the whole pattern of her life with her son. The way he had cajoled her into signing documents she couldn't read, the mortgage he had concealed, the cold calculation he had inherited from no one but himself. She saw a different future, one in which she might persuade Serena to let her keep a roof over her head. And she saw the one in front of her if she lied now, and he still failed. "My son is lying," she said into the microphone. The room fell silent. Marcus stared at her, mouth open. "What are you doing?" he whispered, horror and fury battling in his eyes. "I won't read this," she said, crumpling the script. "He wanted me to claim Serena abused us, that she forced signatures. None of that is true. He forged my name on the loan for my condo. He used my trust and my bad eyesight against me. If anyone here deserves the word victim, it isn't him." Cameras flashed like lightning. Journalists shouted questions. Marcus grabbed for the microphone. Patricia jerked it away, nails digging into his hand. "She saved that company from his greed," Patricia added, now crying in earnest. "If she's watching, I want her to know. I will testify. I'll tell her everything." In her office, Serena muted the television. The roar of the press room became a silent pantomime. For a long moment, she simply watched the image of Marcus flailing and Patricia clinging to the microphone as if it were a lifeline. "Spiders in a jar," she murmured. "When the jar breaks, they devour each other." Mr. James gave a low whistle. "Do you want to move against him now? The district attorney will be listening very closely after that." "Not yet," Serena said. "Let him try one more dramatic gesture. Then we'll end it." Moments later, Mr. James's phone vibrated. The head of security informed him that Marcus had fled the press center, slipping out a side door to escape reporters. Nobody knew where he was heading, but there was a guess. "The community center," Serena said. "The concert is tonight. He'll go where he knows he can wound me in front of people I actually care about." She picked up her coat. "We'll be ready." The community center's auditorium was not grand, but it was alive in a way the hotel ballroom had never been. Fold-out chairs creaked under the weight of parents and grandparents. Children in white shirts and black trousers whispered excitedly on the risers, faces scrubbed, shoes polished. A faint smell of old wood and floor polish hung in the air, mixed with the nervous energy of 100 breaths. Serena stood before the children, back straight, baton poised. Her black dress was simple but well cut, bought not to impress investors, but because she liked how it moved. At the first gentle sweep of her arm, the choir's voices rose, clear and warm. The music wrapped around her like a shield, softening the jagged edges of the last few days. Then the doors at the back of the hall slammed open so hard they struck the walls. A few younger children jumped, their voices faltering. The song wavered, then shuddered to a halt. Marcus stood in the doorway, hair disheveled, sweater wrinkled, eyes glittering with feverish intensity. He clapped slowly, mockingly. "Beautiful," he shouted. "Isn't she something? Our local saint." Parents twisted in their seats. Some recognized him from the news broadcast, now replaying hourly. Others only saw a man who reeked of trouble. "Marcus," Serena said into the microphone, turning. Her voice carried calmly through the speakers. "Leave. You are not welcome here." He strode down the aisle, ignoring the murmurs around him, the way people pulled their children closer. "You stole my life," he shouted, pointing at her. "My company, my home, my reputation. You're nothing but a music teacher pretending to be a queen. Give me back what's mine." A factory worker seated near the front row stood up. He was broad-shouldered, his hands calloused from years of manual labor. His daughter, a shy girl with braids, stood on the top riser, staring at her feet. "You've scared the kids enough," the man said, planting himself between Marcus and the stage. "Get out." Another parent rose. Then a third. A grandmother on the balcony shouted, "Leave her alone." The hall filled with the rustle of people standing, forming an unspoken barrier between Marcus and the trembling children. "You don't understand," Marcus said, voice cracking. "She tricked all of you. She tricked me. I built that company. She's nothing without my name." "We've watched the news," the factory worker replied. "We saw your mother on television. We heard about the doctor. Looks to me like she's the one who did the work while you were busy stealing." Marcus looked around at the circle of ordinary people rising to their feet. He had never been afraid of them before. They'd always been scenery in the background of his life. Now their collective gaze felt heavier than any boardrooms. "Serena," he pleaded, searching her face. Tell them you're doing this to punish me. We can make a deal. Just not like this. Not with these people watching." She stepped down from the stage and walked toward him, the crowd parting to let her pass. Up close, he looked smaller somehow, hunched around his own fear. "You wanted to speak to the owner," she said. "I'm here." He swallowed, glancing at the doors. Two uniformed police officers stood there, not yet inside, waiting. He understood the choice hanging over him. "This is insane," he whispered. "You owe me 10 years. I gave you 10 years of my life." "You were paid for those 10 years," Serena replied. "Quite well. In return, you poisoned my body, tried to erase my father, plotted to throw me out with nothing, and treated the company as your personal wallet. You don't get to cry about investments now." She nodded to Mr. James, who handed her a slim blue folder. She flipped it open and took out a single sheet of paper. "You have two options," she said, raising her voice so everyone could hear. "The first is prison. The evidence is clear: forged signatures, financial fraud, conspiracy with a doctor to cause bodily harm. Your own mother is prepared to testify. If I push the district attorney, you could serve 15 years. You will never again be able to wear a suit and pretend to be important." Marcus blanched. For a moment, he seemed to forget he was being watched at all. The image of a small cell with a metal bed flickered behind his eyes so visibly that the first row of parents shifted uncomfortably. "The second option," Serena continued, "is work. Real work. The kind you never respected." She handed him the paper. His own name looked back at him at the top of the contract. Marcus Thorne. Position: Junior Logistics Coordinator. Assignment: Northern Regional Hub. He skimmed the text, disbelief twisting his features. "This is in the middle of nowhere," he said. "A warehouse in the Arctic? You created that branch to punish incompetent employees. It's 40 below most of the year. You called it the exile station. And you sent people there for smaller mistakes than the ones you made," Serena said. "The salary is minimal. All but a basic living stipend will go toward repaying your debt to the company. If you sign, I will withdraw the current criminal complaint and agree not to file new charges as long as you complete your term without incident." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some faces showed satisfaction, others unease. It was a harsh sentence, but nothing compared to what he had planned for her. "And if I refuse?" he asked hoarsely. She glanced toward the officers at the door. One of them shifted his stance slightly, as if readying to step forward. "Then I tear this contract in half," Serena said, "and I let the law take its course. They will be more than happy to do what I have held back from doing." The hall seemed to hold its breath. Marcus looked at the contract, at the officers, at the children watching from the stage with wide eyes, at the community that had stood up to protect Serena. His pride screamed that he should throw the paper in her face, call her bluff, march out. But the image of iron bars remained, stubborn and cold. "A pen," he said finally, voice hollow. Mr. James handed him a cheap ballpoint taken from the community center's office. The weight of it felt heavier than any Mont Blanc Marcus had owned. He pressed the contract against the folder and signed, the loops of his signature digging into the paper. Serena took the document, glanced at it to ensure it was complete, and nodded to the officers. One of them touched 2 fingers to his forehead in acknowledgement. Then both stepped back out into the hall, leaving without ever having to cross the threshold. "Your train leaves at 6:30 tomorrow morning," she said. "One-way ticket economy. Miss it, and I will reconsider my mercy." She turned away from him and walked back toward the stage. People sat down slowly, some still watching Marcus as if expecting him to explode. He didn't. He folded his copy of the contract with shaking hands and slipped it into his pocket like a sentence he would carry with him everywhere. When Serena raised her baton again, the children picked up the song where they had left off. Their voices rose, uncertain at first, then growing stronger. The notes filled the space Marcus had occupied, washing away the echo of his shouting. He slipped out of the hall unseen. In the cool air outside, he stood for a long time staring at the lit windows, listening to the muffled swell of music. Then he turned toward home, or what was left of it, to pack. 3 months later, the city looked different. The sign atop the former Thorn Group Tower had been replaced by a more modest plaque. Beloit Cultural Foundation, named after Serena's mother's family. The building no longer hosted lavish launch parties. Instead, its conference rooms were filled with music teachers, community organizers, and young artists pitching projects for underserved neighborhoods. Serena stepped out of the fertility clinic into crisp winter air with a file in her hands and a smile that seemed to start somewhere near her heart and work its way outward. The new doctor, recommended by an attorney who specialized in medical malpractice, had reviewed her history, shaken his head in disbelief at what had been done to her, and then given her news that felt like sunlight. Her body had recovered. Her chances of carrying a pregnancy were good. Mr. James waited at the curb in the same black sedan that had once served as her prison. Now it was simply a car. "Good news?" he asked, seeing her expression reflected in the rearview mirror as she slid into the back seat. "The best," she said. "We're starting a proper treatment protocol. One based on truth this time. If things go well by spring." He smiled, lines at the corners of his eyes deepening. "About time the world gave you something it hadn't laced with conditions." As they drove through streets lined with early holiday decorations, Mr. James mentioned that Patricia had called to thank Serena for paying her utility bill. After the legal dust settled, Serena had arranged for the condo's mortgage to be transferred fully into the foundation's portfolio. Patricia was allowed to stay in a smaller company apartment as a tenant at will. She lived alone now, in a space with no servants and no velvet gown, attending church regularly and keeping her voice low when she called. She asked if she could adopt a cat, Mr. James said. "Lonely," she says. "Let her," Serena replied after a moment. "If she has something small and helpless to care for, maybe she'll learn what it means to protect instead of destroy." At a red light, Mr. James nodded toward the sidewalk. "Speaking of learning things," he said quietly. "Look." A municipal worker in an orange vest was chipping ice away from the curb with a heavy iron bar. His face was raw from the wind, beard patchy, posture bent. When he straightened for a moment to rest, Serena recognized him immediately. Marcus stared at the passing traffic, then his eyes snagged on the black sedan. Recognition flashed across his features. He squinted, trying to see through the tinted glass. There was no anger there now, no wild outrage. Only exhaustion and a deep emptiness, like someone staring at the ruins of a house they themselves had burned down. He never made it to the northern hub, Mr. James said. He couldn't follow instructions in training. Mixed up shipments. Called his supervisor an idiot. They dismissed him before he ever left the city. With his record and reputation, this was the only steady work he could find. Street services, daily hire, no benefits. Serena watched him for a heartbeat longer. Once, the sight would have twisted her with pity or stirred up a desire for revenge. Now, she felt nothing but a distant, quiet acceptance. He had chosen the road he walked on. She had simply stepped out of his way and let him meet its end. The light turned green. "Let's go," she said. "We have a rehearsal this evening. The Foundation's youth orchestra wants to try a new piece." The car pulled away. In the mirror, she saw Marcus grow smaller, then vanish in the blur of traffic and falling snow. She took out her phone and dialed a familiar number. When her father answered, his voice carried the sounds of the farm. A dog barking, wind in the trees, the clink of tools. "Hi, Dad," she said, her smile returning. "I'm on my way home. The doctor had good news. And I'm not alone anymore. I have you. I have the kids at the center. I have work that means something. That's more than I ever had in that big house. Come visit this weekend," he said, his voice thick with emotion he didn't hide. "We'll go through those old letters together. I saved everyone they sent back to me. I want you to see them, to know what I wrote." "I will," she promised. "This time, nothing and no one will stand between us." She hung up and rested her head against the seat. Outside, the city moved on with its own rhythm, unaware of the battles that had been fought in boardrooms and courtrooms and cramped medical offices. Inside the car, Serena closed her eyes and listened to the music already forming in her mind for the next concert, a melody threaded with grief and triumph, and a quiet kind of joy that didn't depend on anyone's permission. The life she had once lived had ended in a locked car outside a hotel. The life she had now was something she had claimed herself, step by step, document by document, truth by painful truth. There was no fairy tale happily ever after, no prince restoring her to some rightful throne. There was only a woman who had finally realized she had never needed a savior at all. And somewhere on a cold street corner, a man in an orange vest chipped away at stubborn ice, slowly clearing a path he would not be the first to walk.